because he wanted a bigger place in the sun for his wife. June the 28th was a special day for the Archduke and his wife, their 14th wedding anniversary. She had been Countess Sophie Chotek, child of a noble but obscure Czech family, lady-in-waiting to the Archduke's cousin Isabella. Old Emperor Francis Joseph was so offended by his nephew's choice of a mate beneath his station that the two wrangled about the marriage for 1 year. When at last the Emperor consented, Francis Ferdinand got only half of what he wanted. He was compelled to renounce the rights of succession and rank for his children, taking Sophie as a morganatic wife. The marriage proved to be a great love affair, blessed by 3 children. But the humiliation and bitterness lasted, the more so because the court in Vienna snubbed Sophie and did what it could to cut her dignity. She couldn't ride in the royal carriage with her husband or sit in the royal box at the theatre. At court balls, where he led the procession, she was placed behind the last princess of royal blood. Gradually the old emperor softened towards Sophie, but Francis Ferdinand could never forgive the court. Such a sentiment wasn't in him. Swollen with pride, dangerously thin-skinned, a misanthrope, religious bigot and miser, he was the loneliest man in Vienna, loved only by his wife and children. There was no moderation in him. His humours and rages were those of a spoiled child. No worthwhile subordinate could abide him for very long. His career was littered with broken friendships, ruined by his venomous temper and petty spite. Not addicted to small vices, he showed his love of excess in more lordly ways. By the age of 33, he had shot his 1,000th stag. By 46, he had bagged 5,000. In Sarajevo, at the age of 51, the hunter became the hunted. Francis Ferdinand's love for Sophie and his desire that she should have special honour on her wedding anniversary took him to Sarajevo. 2 corps of the Austrian army, regularly stationed in Bosnia, were holding their annual manoeuvres next to the border with Serbia, Austria's tiny neighbour. The Archduke was the Inspector General of the army, and it was his duty to go, but he prearranged the meeting with Sophie in Sarajevo because in that company, on that day, she would have to be treated with royal honours. There were political overtones to the visit transcending these personal considerations. Pre-war Austria-Hungary was a loose linking of 2 empires run by strong races, the Germans and the Magyars. There were large, submerged Slav minorities in both countries, the Czechs and Slovaks in the north, the Serbs and Croats in the south. The Habsburgs, who were the feudal German overlords of this weird amalgam of mutually distrustful peoples, had their greatest difficulties with the largest and proudest of the blocs, the Hungarians. They therefore inclined to favour certain of their Slav subjects in order to offset the power and influence of their strongest vassal. Francis Ferdinand was an extreme champion of this policy. Further, he nursed the false conceit that since he had married a northern Slav, he was viewed with extra grace by the southern Slavs. The people of Serbia viewed Francis Ferdinand as a threat to all they coveted simply because he advocated trialism or triple reorganization of the empire in place of the existing dualism. He was credited with believing that giving the Slavs an equal voice with Germans and Magyars was the way to regenerate the empire. Right or wrong, the suspicion in the Serbian mind doomed him at the Serbian hand. Should he rule and have his way, there could never rise a greater Serbia. So Serbian nationalists had to cast him as the blackest of villains. Bosnia and the sister province of Herzegovina were at the core of this scheming and striving. Although their populations were mainly Serb and Croat, Vienna had administered them since 1878, when the Turks had been expelled. But juridically the 2 provinces had remained Turkish until 1908, when they were annexed to the dual monarchy. While the great powers took this high-handed act quite calmly, it outraged the Serbians. The southern province